So we now come to question time for our talk on reach to grasp, coordination of hand and arm. And I'm sharing this talk in conversation with Ailie Turton and Paulette Van Vliet. And so now we go to the question that we've received. It asks, what are the implications of reach to grasp studies in humans for robotics? And the way we've chosen to address this is to think about robotics in the context of neurorehabilitation. And so what can we say about robotics for reach to grasp? Well, one aspect that we have seen a number of studies is to see whether robotics can provide useful strengthening of component actions within reach to grasp that will improve the reach to grasp function. And so there's been an interest in the Manus robotic gym, which was developed to provide exercises for different types of movements. This might be whole arm movements. This might be more an elbow movement, and this might be maybe more a wrist movement. I can't see all the details. So the idea was that there was a trials, RATTLES, that was run in Newcastle, where this robotic gym was used to try and improve the outcome for hemiplegic stroke patients, where they were being compared with a control group who had usual therapy and another control group who received no therapy. I think Ailie and Paulette, you can probably fill in some of the details on this.
Ailie? Actually, okay, thanks. It's a very large trial and very recently been published. There were three kind of groups in the trial. One of them actually had what they call usual care, which could be some therapy. It could be no therapy. And the other control group had face-to-face therapy for the same amount of time in arm training as the robot therapy would have been. So that was 3 times a week. So they did match the amount of therapy to the experimental arm, the robot therapy arm. Unfortunately, there was no difference when measured on a functional action. It's called the Action Research Arm Test, which is really a reaching assessment. There wasn't any difference between the groups, but I still think there's a place for robotics in supporting therapy. I think all the things we've been talking about in the talk are about the coordination of reach and grasp, and that's very difficult to do in therapy because stroke patients often have difficulty with both the transport and the grasp, and so we end up having to break it down into components. But by breaking it down into components, then they lose the coordination training aspect. So a robot, if it's programmed correctly, could assist in one component and let the person concentrate on another component and within the kind of coordinated context. So I think there's still a lot of work to do in seeing if robotics is helpful in therapy.
I would agree that even though this study hasn't shown a significant difference, there have been quite a few studies leading up to that did show positive differences with smaller numbers. So I still think it's worthwhile, and also we need lots and lots of repetitions after something like a stroke for the neuroplasticity to occur that underlies motor recovery, and robots provide a fantastic opportunity to do the thousands of repetitions that's needed without a therapist being present all the time. And I agree with Ailie's point about we can do more sort of natural movements, especially now with more modern robots. And in order to get these reach to grasp coordination things going on, we do need naturalistic movements. And I'm actually working with an engineer at Canberra, Shahid Hussain, who's using this assist as needed approach algorithms to just give assistance when the person needs it, so they can use as much force and start to regain as much force activation as they can, rather than the robot assisting too much. So I think things are getting a lot more sophisticated now, and that's going to be very good for producing these naturalistic movements that patients need to do, and that may help their quality. So the RATTLES study might not have seen a quantitative difference, but what about the way in which people perform movements? Robots may be able to help with that as well.
Thanks for those comments. And I would say there's one other area which we are also all thinking about, I guess, is that robots can serve as collaborative assistants for people with disabilities. And so one of the issues perhaps is that the robot assistant has to hand over or receive objects from the user. And this handover is really quite a tricky area. So one's always working at the task level, thinking about prediction. And so in this case, we have a human participant taking dishes, perhaps from a dishwasher, and passing them to perhaps the disabled user who's getting the exercise of putting them on the plate rack. And in this case, the robot could be doing this just as well and passing it to the person who's getting the rehabilitation from doing this movement, putting the dishes on the plate rack. But here we've got to think about how the task level will be defined so that both the robot and the disabled participant are able to understand each other to affect good coordination and to improve their performance as they progress. I suppose our last comment would be the potential role for soft robotics, which is an emerging area, isn't it, in robotics, and the collaborations that are going on, particularly with Ailie and Paulette in this area. Is that right? I think Ailie, you...
Ailie is working on something.
Yeah, I'm working with within Bristol Robotics Laboratory with the soft robotics group led by Jonathan Rossiter. All the pictures that you can see on this slide show very hard, constrained robotics. Soft robotics offers the ability to be more naturalistic. We can see eventually that soft actuators will be put into clothing so that we can use them to assist movements and to give graded assistance to movements out in the natural world, picking up all sorts of things. So I think we will find that if we can, these soft robotic devices will be much more helpful with a whole variety of tasks than the hard robotics has managed to do so far.
So thank you then for the comments here. This is the end to our contribution. I think we have one more slide which gives some references for what we've been talking about and a general context. We'd be very interested to hear from anybody who wanted to ask us more questions, and in particular interested in the collaborations, which I know Ailie and Paulette are deeply involved with at present, to take this kind of work forward. So we look forward to hearing from everybody. So thanks very much for listening.